This weekend is a massive weekend for combat sports fans for multiple reasons, and those multiple reasons are multiple massive events. UFC 309 is a huge pay-per-view event, but we've also got another huge pay-per-view event here between the KSW 100 card, with the headliner being Mamed Khalidov taking on Adrian Bartosinski in what is a super fight by any means between Mamed Khalidov, a former champion, kind of a legend of KSW, at this point a guy who has just been fighting in super fights himself, taking on a guy in Adrian Bartosinski who is 16-0 now and the welterweight champion, recently defeated Saladin Parnasse to defend that belt. Aside from that, there are 3 more championship fights on the card: the heavyweight championship fight, the featherweight interim championship fight, as well as the light heavyweight championship is now on the line, as well as they did a light heavyweight tournament to determine who was going to be the champion. This is just not the only big event though. I do want to make a video on the Cage Warriors card, but I did just start a new job and it sounds like I'm going to have a pretty busy day tomorrow, so if I was to expect a video on that, it would probably be in like 2 or 3 days time, to be honest with that one. But I'm going to try and cover that one as well in video form, but it will be in article form, of course, on the We Want Picks website. If you do sign up using my code ARTEM, you do support my channel a lot, as I do get a commission from We Want Picks. And it is a 10% discount for you for your first purchase, whether that is 1 month for $9 or a year or lifetime, if you really wanted to go that far. Now, with that being said, let's get into the predictions. I'm going to try and go off a rough estimate of how I think that the fight card is going to be. And I am going to skip a couple of these early prelims just because I'm lazy. Let's move on. Piotr Kuberski is going to be fighting against Damian Janikowski. Damian Janikowski, if you guys don't know, is a former Olympian. I believe it was in 2012. He won an Olympic bronze medal in Greco-Roman wrestling, and then from there he did compete in a couple of other European games and Commonwealth games, but that is probably the biggest achievement that he did manage to get at the Greco-Roman wrestling level. And then since then he decided to transfer his skills over to the world of MMA, and he has found a lot of success. I mean, this is a guy who just fought for the title against Paweł Polak and just a little bit earlier this year, and he had actually fought Paweł Polak before that as well. And Damian Janikowski, not the best record in the world, but at the end of the day, spent the majority of his career fighting against some of the best guys. Now, he's going to be taking on a pretty dangerous opponent here in Piotr Kuberski. This is a guy who just has insane KO power. I watched quite a few of his fights, and his KSW KOs that he have got is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's this one here against Bartosinski, where he lands like an overhand right hand, and it just shuts his lights out. Like, he's like, Lishko's done. And then he finishes him off with another hook. It's a pretty sick KO. And then in this one here against Michal Materla is a massive guy for the weight class. And Materla's kind of closing the distance on him, but Piotr Kuberski just kind of throws like a few hooks in the pocket, and Materla just drops like a sack of potatoes. Like, he just drops. So this is a guy in Kuberski here who does have insane KO power, but he's going to have to deal with someone trying to take him down, which could be quite difficult. But the thing about the Greco-Roman wrestling style is that we have seen it before with Mark Madsen, is that the Greco-Roman style doesn't necessarily translate as well over to MMA as, I guess, the American wrestling style would be called, the freestyle wrestling style. We see a lot of guys, even from Japan, with the freestyle wrestling style, like Rinya Nakamura and Shin Haraguchi, find a lot of success. But the Greco-Roman style kind of relies on a lot more of like the trips and the high clinch positions, where you're kind of shoulder to shoulder, chest to chest, and you're trying to rip the opponent down in that way. It doesn't work as well in MMA because there is like clinch knees, and a lot of guys are learning to reverse positions in the clinch, so that advantage doesn't really happen so much. It's going to be a tough stylistic matchup for Kuberski because he is a striker. He is 6'3", but he's not really the biggest 6'3" at 185. He's a pretty lanky guy, but kind of just like Carlos Prates, he does just seem to have insane precision. And when he lands, he knocks his opponents out, and he does have a lot of power. He is a pretty big favorite. He's minus 285. I think he does win by KO. He is my prediction to win, but I'm not overly confident in Kuberski to get it done. But I do think he does find that KO blow. He's looked very good in his short run in the KSW so far, and if he does beat Janikowski, he's probably going to be getting a title shot in his next one. And now we can move up to the next one. Igor Michaliszyn fighting against Madars Fleminas. Madars Fleminas is a rangy striker who did actually fight for Cage Warriors in the past. I actually broke down quite a few of his Cage Warriors events way back when I actually covered Cage Warriors a little bit more extensively on YouTube. And Fleminas, he is a rangy striker. Now, he does have pretty sick KO power. 7 out of his 13 wins are by knockout, a lot of them in the first round. But he doesn't really just go out there and try to blitz his opponents. He does, for the most part, fight from range and try and pick his opponents apart from range. I just want to triple check what weight class this is going to be at. It's at 170, which is Fleminas' more natural weight class. But I do like Fleminas in general. He does have a pretty interesting style. We did see him out kickbox another kickboxer in Cage Warriors, Alexei Montefiore. And then also before that, he did just knock out Daniel Skabinski, who was a guy who actually had found some success. I believe he got that big KO win before this fight over the English guy who was on the Contender Series. You guys know who I'm talking about. But Igor Michaliszyn, I like him in this matchup specifically because I think that he's quite well-rounded. I think he's quite good. He has looked pretty good so far. I mean, he did actually get a title shot against Bartosinski, who's fighting in the headliner of this card. That's his most recent win. But Michaliszyn is a guy that can mix it up. I actually was quite impressed with the striking of him. But the thing is, he doesn't have the best striking defense. And I think in this matchup, he's probably going to look to use that wrestling against Fleminas. I believe it must have been his most recent matchup. No, I don't think it was the Oton Jose fight. It was one of these fights. He was finding some success on the feet. But then he did get blitzed and he did get hurt. And he just immediately shot for a double leg, put his opponent down on the ground, and then controlled him out for the rest of the rounds on top. And I like that. I like the fact that I can see well-roundedness out of Michaliszyn. I do see Fleminas, for the most part, really just being that rangy striker, and that can be pretty hard to close the distance on. But Michaliszyn's pretty solid. I mean, he does have nice striking in his own right. It's not like he's going to be severely outmatched here, and he does have nice power. But I do think that it is a Michaliszyn decision by mixing in the striking with the wrestling, even though he is going to be now taking on a pretty dangerous guy at this weight class with a lot of power. Just going to try and quickly find the odds. Michaliszyn is minus 270, which is once again pretty wide, but I do think that Michaliszyn is going to win. Now we can move up to the heavyweight matchup. This is Arkadiusz Wrszosek, I believe is how you say his surname, taking on Mattheus Scheffel. And with any Mattheus Scheffel matchup, what I try and do is I look at the opponent and I try and figure out, can they knock out Mattheus Scheffel? Because if you guys are familiar with Mattheus Scheffel, this is a guy who, in my opinion, probably shouldn't be fighting. He's got 9 KO losses, and a lot of these KO losses are actually pretty brutal. And he even got knocked out by Bruno Capelloza, and Capelloza got overturned because of USADA really kind of got him. But this is a guy that got KO'd 4 times in the span of less than a couple of years. And that wasn't even the start of the KO losses. This guy's been knocked out multiple times in his career. It's just kind of sad to see, and I just don't trust the chin. The thing about him, though, is he actually does have some skills. I mean, he outstruck Bruno Capelloza in probably one of the weirdest fights of all time in 2022. I don't know if you guys saw that fight or saw that event in general. That was something else. I'll say that much. But Mattheus Scheffel, he is a striker himself, but he has no chin. And when I was looking into Arkadiusz Wrszosek, I was actually reminded of who Wrszosek was. You guys may not actually just recognize him right now. Maybe this image will ring a bell. But if you guys don't know who Wrszosek is, he is the guy who got the 2021 KO of the year for Glory Kickboxing when he knocked out Buddy Hari in a fight which you can watch on YouTube. And I strongly recommend you watch this on YouTube because it is a fantastic fight. And it is a massive comeback against Buddy Hari. Hari is just beating him up. He drops Wrszosek once to the head, I believe, at the start of round 1, and then he drops him again to the body at the end of round 1. And you don't really see guys typically get up so quickly from body shots, but Wrszosek must be a tough guy. And then he gets dropped again in the second round due to the body as well. And Buddy Hari is just coming forward and stalking him down, trying to find that finish. But Wrszosek, out of nowhere, literally nowhere, throws a head kick that knocks out Buddy Hari quite badly as well. Hari was out cold. And then they did the rematch. The rematch was a whole situation because there were fans rioting. it's pretty bad. Like, the fans were like throwing equipment and chairs and stuff at each other. They actually cancelled the whole event when that happened. You guys may or may not have known that happened, but nonetheless, he took his kickboxing skills to the MMA world, and he has found a lot of success since then. And as you can guess, he can find the chin of Scheffel, and I think he can knock out Scheffel. The thing about him, though, that there is some concerns about, this guy Thomas Mosny took him to a pretty, like, not really a close decision, but he did drop him. And another thing that I will say about Wojcik in MMA is that he does just have a very interesting style for heavyweight, because being a 6'7" guy that isn't weighing in at the top of 265, he's a pretty lean guy, and because of that, he's very athletic, he's very fast, he throws a lot of kicks, and in MMA he has translated a lot of leg kicks to his game. And it's kind of funny that you kind of think about it, you don't really see leg kicks being thrown that regularly, I don't think, in MMA at the heavyweight level, I would say. And I just think that Wojcik's going to knock out Scheffel. I think that he's going to take out the legs, and then from there, I think he's going to be able to take out the head, because poor Mattheus Scheffel, man. That chin ain't got much left, I can tell you that much. But to look at the odds here, I don't think that there are odds out for this fight for some reason or another. Maybe someone in the comments will know, but I don't see odds for this fight. But I'm just going to kind of guess that Wojcik probably is a favorite in this fight. The next fight that I have from there is Haratyk. So let's find the Rafal Haratyk versus Marcin Wojcik fight. Now, in this matchup, this is a rematch, and this is actually a rematch from a tournament that KSW hosted to determine who was going to be the light heavyweight champion. And in that tournament, Marcin Wojcik and Rafal Haratyk actually fought against each other. And in this tournament, Rafal Haratyk actually come out on top by knocking out Marcin Wojcik. And you can see that it was actually a single night tournament to determine who was going to be the champion of 205 pounds. And Haratyk knocked out Wojcik with a massive overhand right. And that fight, and I think that result was actually a bit of an upset. And I think that the odds did slightly favour Haratyk to win that fight at the time, but I think the majority of the public was on Wojcik. And going through the fights and actually watching the tape on these guys, I like Wojcik more to win this fight. So I am going to side with Wojcik, but I will give my reasoning here in a second. One thing I will say about Rafal Haratyk is that he is a very good fighter. This is the same guy, if you guys recognize the name or not, that gave Abdurragimov a lot of trouble. He did end up losing that fight at the end of the 5th round, but if you guys know, that was a comeback win out of nowhere for the Lazy King when he was able to pull that off. And he's even got the win over Azamat Bekoev, who is now like 19-3, 18-3, fighting for the LFA, finding a lot of success there. He beat Ivan Arslan, who is now in the UFC, did lose to Ion Kutalaba. I wish it happened by submission. If you know, you know. But nonetheless, Haratyk, he is the champion. He won the light heavyweight title. Seems to kind of mostly be a striker, and when he does strike, he keeps his hands very, very low, which is funny, because so does Marcin Wojcik. Marcin Wojcik, he calls himself the Giant. He's not really like a tall guy for 205 pounds, being 6'1". You're not really going to be towering over guys. I feel like at 205 pounds, to be a big, tall guy, you've got to be like 6'4". But Wojcik isn't 6'4". He's 6'1", but he's a big boy. I mean, this guy is absolutely massive for 205 pounds, and being 6'1", it's kind of on the shorter end, I would almost say. The way that he wins his fights is he stalks down his opponents with a lot of pressure, and he just seems to be very comfortable in the cage. Maybe a little bit too comfortable, I'll be honest, because this guy keeps his hands by his waist sometimes. He's just walking forwards in front of his opponents with his hands by his waist, but when he throws, he can close the distance very well, and I think that he is more imposing and he's got more power than Haratyk. And I actually think that we're going to see Wojcik beat Haratyk here by KO. I think he's going to get that win back, and we're probably going to see a trilogy. I just kind of, what I noticed when I was fighting these two, and I don't really know how to explain it in any better way than this, because this isn't going to be a good explanation. When I watched both guys on the film, watched their previous fights, I just thought that Wojcik looked a little bit better. So I'm going to pick Wojcik. It kind of is as simple as that. And he is the slight underdog. -114 to -130. I thought that Wojcik was plus money. Maybe he was yesterday. But Nonetheless, Wojcik is a very slight underdog in this matchup, and he is the big underdog in the terms of the public opinion. To move up to the next one, we're going to be talking about the Robert Ruchala Interim Featherweight Championship against Kacper Formela. And Kacper Formela, he's a guy that found a lot of success for the FEN promotion, and FEN seems to be like a promotion that really is like a huge feeder to KSW, but it is actually the promotion which Mattheus found a lot of success in before he actually signed up to the UFC. But a lot of these guys in KSW are guys from the FEN promotion, and Kacper Formela is no different. Look at this run that he went on for FEN, defended his belt multiple times, and what he brings to the table is just another very well-rounded skill set. I feel like he can wrestle and he can strike, but I do think that in moments I am seeing him get caught on the feet, and I am seeing him getting hurt in some moments as well. But watching Robert Ruchala, I'll be honest, if you only watch his fight against Saladin Panasi, he looked very unimpressive, I thought, against Saladin Panasi. Now, Saladin Panasi, as you guys may or may not know, is probably one of the best pound-for-pound fighters on the planet. This is the guy that is the champion of 145, 155, and recently fought for the 170-pound division title against Adrian Bartosinski. But nonetheless, we're talking about a guy that's quite good at fighting, as Saladin Panasi, and he beat Ruchala everywhere. So I kind of thought, oh, that wasn't a good fight to start on, because Robert Ruchala, I thought he looked a step behind on the feet against Panasi, and even then Panasi was out wrestling him, even though Ruchala was really trying to attempt takedowns early on into the fight. Ruchala, though, I quite like him. I think that he actually is a pretty good fighter overall, and I do think that he is going to be good enough to defeat Kacper Formela in this matchup here. He is a guy that, if he's not fighting Saladin Panasi, is going to want to stalk forward. He does use his range pretty well on the feet. I wouldn't say he's got the most technical striking, but he can attempt takedowns every now and then. And I think, once again, it probably is just going to be one of those situations where we're going to see both guys have a pretty well-rounded skill set, but I think the aggressor in the fight is going to be Robert Ruchala, and I think that he is going to kind of come forward and be, for lack of better terms, be a bit of like an offensive storm against someone like Formela, who we have seen kind of, although look like a beast recently and really find success, we still have seen him find some struggles against an opponent that wants to pressure him. And I know that Ruchala can do that. That is Ruchala's style. If he's fighting Saladin Panasi, maybe not, but he's not fighting Saladin Panasi. I know that Formela is very experienced, but I'm going with Ruchala, and I think he is minus 320. Okay, those odds are a lot wider than I thought that they were, but I'm picking Ruchala anyway. I do think he wins a decision as well. And now we can move up to the heavyweight championship fight, the co-main event, which is Phil DeFries trying to make his 11th title defense at 265 pounds. And I know that sounds crazy, but it is true. Phil DeFries, low-key, been on maybe one of the most, if not the most, underrated title runs just in general. He won the title, I believe, 2018. It was 2018, and since then has just defended the belt multiple times. Now, to be fair, a couple of these wins have just been against guys that KSW has signed to give him another opponent, because they're running out of opponents for him. He's literally beaten the whole division at this point. They signed Augusto Sakai to fight against him, and Phil DeFries did win that fight, but he didn't look that good, I'll be honest. And then against Todd Duffy, they signed Todd Duffy, who hadn't fought for 4 years and was coming off a loss as well. I guess technically 2 losses in a row for that, so I guess you could put an asterisk on that title win, but that's kind of how desperate KSW were getting to give Phil DeFries title defenses. And I feel like maybe at this point, now he's really going to be taking on a legitimate title challenger. Darko Stosic is going to be no joke for Phil DeFries. Darko Stosic is a guy who has actually fought Phil DeFries before. It was a few years ago. It was kind of at the start of Darko Stosic's KSW career, where he committed to the move to 265 pounds, as he did fight at light heavyweight in the UFC. And against that fight was pretty gritty, but Phil DeFries kind of just really put it on him, and Darko Stosic ended up tapping to exhaustion and just damage that had amounted over the course of 5 rounds. And in all honesty, that could maybe happen again, I'll be honest. But let's talk about what he's done after that, because he's kind of been a bit of a menace. Now, against Shimil Gaziev, I know he got knocked out by Shimil Gaziev. he did knock down Shimil Gaziev before getting KO'd by him. So at least against the legendary Blob himself, we have seen him get a knockdown. And then after that, he's just been knocking everyone out in KSW. And that's kind of what Darko Stosic does. Now, he isn't really the tallest guy for the weight class. He is a former light heavyweight after all. But he's put on a lot of weight in a couple of different ways. But for the most part, a lot of muscle has been built up for him. And the way that he fights is he does stalk forward, he does come forward, and he does try and throw and land massive hooks. And I think against Phil de Vries, there is a real chance that maybe he is going to land on Phil de Vries. Because I will be honest, Phil de Vries, he's 38 years old now. He's been at the top for so long. Maybe there's some complacency at some point. But I feel like if Phil de Vries survives 2 rounds, I know he's going to have the cardio advantage. Now, if you do watch his fight against Augusto Sakai, it was a pretty bad performance. Phil de Vries is typically a guy who is the one moving forward, who is the one getting takedowns on occasion, because he does have pretty slick grappling for a guy at heavyweight. So I feel like it's just going to come down to, really, can he survive the first 2 rounds against Darko Stosic? I think if Stosic wins the fight, it's going to have to be by KO. And I think it's going to have to be by KO early. If Phil de Vries has like a pretty solid game plan revolving around the idea of getting takedowns early and often and just making Stosic work, then gassing out Stosic, and then he can eventually start applying the pressure like he did in the first fight, I think this is a good fight for de Vries. But in some other outcome, there definitely is potential for KSW to get a new heavyweight champion, because at this point they've got a 38-year-old heavyweight champion who has defended the belt 11 times. Now, I do think that Phil de Vries does defend the belt for that 11th time, and I am picking him to do so against Stosic by decision or potentially a late finish as well. But I think that de Vries is going to get a decision here against a guy that I think could potentially take the first round off him, could maybe even hurt him. But de Vries is a tough guy. I think that de Vries is a guy that we are going to see be able to take over towards the end of the later rounds of the fight and end up winning a 5-round decision. So I'm going to pick de Vries here. Minus 470. That's wide. I'm picking de Vries by decision, but I'm not that confident in him. I mean, there could be something there for a Darko Stosic early KO, but I'm still going with de Vries. Nonetheless, he is my pick to win the fight, and my pick to win the fight by decision. Now we move up to the main event. This is, by all definitions, a super fight. This is a fight between guys that I don't believe are fighting for a belt, unless KSW has, like, invented the Mamed Khalidov belt at this point. They honestly might have, because all Mamed Khalidov has been fighting in is super fights. He's 44 years old, but he's still kind of got it. He hasn't really been fighting that often in MMA recently. He did defeat Scott Ashcombe about 1.5 years ago. That was a pretty big win for him, because if you guys don't know, they do have quite a bit of history where he actually won the belt in their rematch to win the belt at 185 pounds. Anyways, and then he beats him again for their third fight. He beats him again. So what he's also been doing, though, is other fights, just other super fights. He fought Roberto Stosic, who then signed to one championship and got knocked out. Sebastian Karstam knocked him out. That was really sad, and he looked really bad. But after that, he fought Mariusz Puc. And if you guys know who Puc is that former world champion bodybuilder, I believe. I guess this photo really isn't going to do it justice. But he was a former world champion bodybuilder who, yeah, you might recognize him from here, who fought at heavyweight and was just knocking everyone out. And a lot of people were kind of seeing him when he was knocking all these guys out, saying on Twitter, like, jokes about KSW's drug testing, because Puc he's a big boy. He's that former world championship bodybuilder build. But Khalidov fought against Puc, and in that fight against Puc, he looked really fast. And I know he's fighting a heavyweight and an old heavyweight at that, but Khalidov was still bouncing around on his feet. He was still throwing his kicks as he typically does. Eventually, the fight got down to the ground, and he ended up finishing Puc with ground and pound on back position. But the way that Mamed Khalidov does fight is that he is a very experienced fighter at this point in his career. 47 professional fights, very well-rounded skill set with very quick striking in general, as well as pretty solid grappling. Most of his wins have come by finish, which is why I think a lot of people like him. But it's interesting, because his style really does revolve around just being very fast. But now he's 44 years old. Can he still kind of do what he used to do, where he's jumping around on his feet and throwing up the kicks from range and then shooting for a takedown every now and then? because he's fighting a 29-year-old Adrian Bartosinski, who is now in the prime of his career and coming off probably one of the biggest wins anyone can get in MMA right now against Saladin Parnasse. Saladin Parnasse, as I did say earlier, is the featherweight champion and the lightweight champion of KSW, and is probably, pound for pound, one of the better MMA fighters on the planet. And Saladin Parnasse, of course, went from 145 to 155 to then try and become the first ever 3-division champion of an MMA promotion. And he took on Adrian Bartosinski. Now, Adrian Bartosinski actually didn't really fight Parnasse in the same way that he had fought opponents in the past. And what I mean by that is Bartosinski typically has just been a very forward pressure, very aggressive fighter that will try and find a finish no matter what. He does have submission wins, but for the most part he really is trying to get that KO. But against Parnasse, I think he kind of recognized the fact that Parnasse just is a very skilled talent, and he just tried to weight bully him for the most part, and that is what he did to win the decision. Used his weight advantage up against the clinch, used his weight advantage in general by moving forward and making sure that Parnasse can't really do what it is that Parnasse does so well, which is his own offensive wrestling and his own very quick movement. So Bartosinski fought with a pretty smart game plan and that one there, and then he fought against Igor Michaliszyn, who's fighting previously on this card. As I did say, a pretty well-rounded fighter for the most part. Bartosinski did do what he does best and ended up finishing the fight by submission. Now he's at 185 pounds, so he is coming up a weight class to meet Mamed Khalidov here, but I don't think that's going to be a bad thing. Bartosinski is he's a big guy for 170, but I don't think he's like one of the biggest guys at all for the weight class, so coming in here against Khalidov, he might be at a size disadvantage, but I don't know if it's going to matter, because at the end of the day, Khalidov's still a menace, though. That's the thing. He's still a beast. But Adrian Bartosinski, he's been fighting the highest at the high level that KSW can offer him in the title defenses at 170 pounds. He just fought Parnasse a couple fights ago now, and all Khalidov's really been doing is the super fights. He had that boxing fight a few months ago, and that ended by injury. And I think that it's kind of just getting to the point now where I feel like the guy who has much more to gain is Bartosinski. Bartosinski's in the prime of his career. I think he has a pretty decent style as well to kind of hurt Khalidov, because he is well-rounded. He's got everything going for him. But on the feet, he can pressure forward and have Khalidov moving backwards. And Khalidov is a very kick-heavy striker. He really relies on that fast movement, on that fast twitch. Being 44 years old, you're going to lose a lot of that. And then moving backwards, you're also going to lose a lot of that. So I am going to go with Adrian Bartosinski, who is a 16-0 champion for the promotion of KSW. I am going to pick him to win as well by finish. I think it's only 3 rounds. Okay, if that actually helps anyone, it is probably Khalidov, but if anything, that probably makes Bartosinski a little bit more aggressive. So I think that actually does favor Bartosinski to finish by finish even more than if it was a 5-round fight. If it was a 5-round fight, I would have picked Bartosinski to probably win in the 3rd or the 4th round. But since it's a 3-round fight, I'm going to pick Bartosinski to win in the 2nd or the 3rd round against Khalidov. I think he's going to wear him down over time, in the 1st and the 2nd, and get a finish at the end of the 2nd or get a finish in the 3rd. Bartosinski's minus 275. Probably a pretty accurate representation of how I feel about the fight as well, to be honest with you guys. Bartosinski's a menace. He's just very good. And I think that this is going to be a good event. You know, this is a good event that takes place on a pretty reasonable time, I feel. I don't know for sure when the UFC starts, but I think that these two events will be overlapping each other, as this one does start at 1 PM Eastern time on Saturday. It is a pay-per-view, but it's a good event. It's going to be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.